Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. It's Wednesday, and we have gathered, as we do on Wednesdays, at Olive Grove Baptist Church, 1034 Albert Avenue in the city of Norfolk, Virginia. We welcome those of you who join us in a virtual way, and are happy to have you present in our conversation tonight. We have, for the last several months, been working our way through the book of Romans on the subject of walking in the favor of God. And tonight, because we're on the first night of our Vacation Bible School, we're going to spend some time making a connection between Juneteenth and the Egyptians, the Israelites' journey from slavery to freedom. Was kept giving me that pause as I'm trying to figure out why I'm looking at what I'm looking at. It's an interesting thing to think about the parallels, and much to my surprise tonight when I walked in, Reverend Garner handed me a conversation between two pastors in Detroit, having a conversation about this. The attitudes among African Americans regarding slavery. And one wants to know from the other, why don't you just get over that? And I can understand why it'd be difficult for someone to understand why it's so difficult for me to get over a thing that's important to me. And I don't mind if you ask me why I don't just get over it. As a matter of fact, if you do, I'd be happy to give you an answer. My approach to this has to do with I'm using Genesis chapter 50 to open the conversation, and I want you to think with me about the three issues of most concern among African American people. Look at that creative Mary White and what she did with that last slide. Put it back up while they're looking up, Mary. Yeah, I like it. Finding your place in his story. And I deliberately put in his story that way because I want you to think about it like that. Yes? It's Genesis 50. Turn to Exodus 50 if you will. Turn to Exodus 50 if you can. Yeah. It's Genesis 50. It's my mistake. When I sent her the email in preparation for this, I was thinking about the Exodus experience, and I sent over Exodus 50, but I meant Genesis 50, and it is Genesis 50 that I want to use to open our conversation tonight. Tell me what are the issues of most concern, most important concern to Americans on this day in this year? Yes, sir. Now, for those of you who don't have much experience with us, in order to include our YouTube classmates in the conversation, you have to have a microphone. And I see that only one microphone is out, or now two. So we need to be able to get access to a microphone in order to talk. You don't have to just talk just because you happen to have it. But if you'll just facilitate and help me spread the microphones around, that'll be good. What are the issues? Cornelius said he knows one of them.
Inflation and gun violence.
So he gave me two issues that he thinks are of most concern among Americans today. Inflation and gun violence. Anybody else? Say that again. Voter restrictions. Okay, voting rights. All right. Does anybody think immigration is important in America today? Yeah. Why do you think immigration is as important as it is? You need a microphone, baby. She says there's a fear by some that people will come over here and take what we have over here already. That's Judy Brown. That's what Judy Brown said. Yes.
Plus, it seems like that people coming in from normally white Caucasian places like Ireland, Russia,
European countries.
yeah, they're welcome with open arms. But people of color coming from the Caribbean, Mexico, Africa, whatever, they seem to have more of a problem.
Yeah. What's the problem that they have?
They're discriminated against.
Which group are you talking about? This?
The people of color.
Okay, that's the problem that people of color have. But you just described Europeans as the people who have the most concern. Yes, Deacon?
What's the problem I see is the majority is in fear of becoming the minority.
And because of the history of that majority, the people of European heritage, and that minority, the people of color, and the dynamics between us have created a certain fear. Yes, Mary?
Can you hear me?
I can
My
now.
biggest problem right now is the redefinition of the truth. Things that we used to know what they mean that mean the opposite now, like the whole LGBT snatching and co-opting the rainbow and pride, and so that the generations are losing track of what that used to mean. Making America great again don't mean the same thing to me that it means to some others. So the redefinition of the truth is creating confusion, like they said we should be expecting in the end times.
Okay. Lorna, was your hand up, or you were just waving at me? Just waving? Hey, Lorna. Yeah. There's a problem that plagues the human race, and sometimes we forget that most of the problems that plague us are historical problems. They've plagued us for a very long time. They plagued us, meaning the human race, for a very long time. And while in the most altruistic language I can imagine, Mary's absolutely right. It has to do with losing, having difficulty hearing or discerning, knowing what's really true, admitting what's really true. What's really true is that and from a faith standpoint, it's true because we have decided that the Bible says it, and that makes it true. And for all of us, that works. Now, for people who don't believe in the Bible and who don't believe that what's in the Bible makes it true, then that's a different conversation. And that's more in the direction of Mary's response. But this thing about the changes that are afoot, changes that are being proposed, the possibility of changes in what this country looks like, it's the fear of losing control. It's the fear of losing the upper hand. It's the fear of things of retribution. It's the fear of some get back. It's the fear that after treating him that way for so long, it makes sense that if the roles were reversed, he would treat me like I've treated him. Now, that's far away from what's true, and perhaps far away from what's real. I don't know what would make anyone think that if I have more guns than you have, and so you can fire more rounds than I have, when there's nobody left but me because I had the most guns, that makes the world a better place. Whoever's looking for that kind of place is likely barking up the wrong tree, but it's not the first time. I want you to go with me to the book of beginnings, and Genesis chapter 50. And after Cornelius leads us through these verses, I'm going to ask Mary to share a series of slides that she has prepared for us. Oh, as soon as it gets up there.
Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel.
Can you do that without your mask? Because you're inaudible. Okay. I can hear the sound, but I don't know what you're saying.
Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalmment, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to the Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to the Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan."
All right, thank you. Now, Mary, I want you to return to verse 1, and I want you to read it slowly. You're like you're racing tonight, but we got to get the thought. We got to get this picture in mind. And I appreciate you putting the emphasis in the right places and that, but it doesn't work better with speed. So if you just slow it down, because I want everybody to get it. All right, let's start again, Mary.
Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed him.
What was his father's name?
Israel.
See that?
Taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalmment, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court,
Slow down. Go ahead.
"If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt. Besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household, only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company.
Now, get this picture. We're talking about some intergenerational stuff, and we're talking about what happens across generations. You remember how they got to Egypt in the first place. They were in trouble, and there was famine. And at the same time, Joseph, who had lost favor with his brothers, even though his father loved him, was sold into slavery. So Joseph became a slave in a place that he did not know. And in the course of years, Joseph lived and died. And here we are in the middle of that story then. All right, keep going, Mary, please.
When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father.
Isaac.
When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning." That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place for Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?"
See that? They used to run things, and then there was a strategic death in the family. somebody who had been the glue that held things together, somebody who helped maintain the status quo, left the scene. And these who had been held in check by their father now find themselves cowering over what might happen now that the brother who they betrayed is in such a powerful position as he is. Come on, Cornelius. Keep going, Mary. We're going to read it, and then we're going back to through the chapter.
So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you ought to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children, also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt.
Pastor, the images that I prepared were in response to that question that you opened up.
I know.
All right?
And that question is, what is it that these institutions have in common? And you might want to make a note for yourself to do this. One is Israel in Egypt, Israel after Egypt, Europe, or Europeans, as Cornelius has said, and the New World, Africa in America, the church, and your homeowners association. Now, not all of us have homeowners associations. Some of us have building associations. Some of us have building management concerns. Some have homeowners associations, and some live more independently. But can you see already the connection between my question about the things that have the most concern, uppermost concern in the minds of most Americans today? And can you see now why I'm suggesting that immigration is a much larger issue than perhaps we in this room make it? That's because the number and color of immigrants who arrive in this country are probably more important to people who are lighter than we. We're not as concerned, certainly not north of the border between Texas and Mexico, not this far north. We're not as concerned as perhaps some other people are about immigrants and what they look like. We have different problems. We're more concerned about the issues the other issues that you raised. Perhaps for people who look like me, voting rights make much more sense. But I don't know if you've noticed, but not everyone is interested in government by the people and for the people. Not everyone is interested in preserving the democracy that we know. Not everyone is interested in pledging allegiance and liberty and justice for all. Some people are interested in liberty and justice for the select. And they fear that in a place where liberty and justice for all is the order of the day, the wrong people could be voted out and the wrong people could be voted in. And we'd have the same kind of dynamic that existed in Egypt at the time of the Exodus. When the Israelites became too many, when they outnumbered, when they threatened to outnumber the Egyptians, when a Pharaoh came along who didn't know what Joseph had done to make sure there was corn in Egypt, who didn't care about what Joseph had done for Egyptians a long time before their time, that Pharaoh made a decision: we're going to have to do something about this. It's too many of them. And when they thought there were too many of them, a plan was made to thin them out by either killing the boys or drowning the boys of a certain age, so that the people who remained, the women who remained, could marry foreigners, could marry Egyptians, and the whole notion of the people who were immigrants coming to power was done away with. How many sources of power can you imagine? Where does power come from? Power comes from wealth.
Physical strength.
Power comes from physical strength. Any other kinds of power?
Economic.
Yeah, is that wealth? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, that's two. Where else? I didn't hear you.
Legacy ownership.
Legacy, okay, money over time.
I mean, ownership. You own the land, the buildings, and everything.
Yeah, that's okay. Symbolic of wealth, yes.
Power in numbers.
Numbers, yeah. That one is perhaps the one that claims the attention of people that Cornelius raises. Because if the borders are open and more of the less desirable people come over, they replace. That's what replacement theory is all about. It's about people of color replacing other people. In Charlottesville a few years ago, they put Jewish people in that number. Remember? They're walking down the street, Jews will not replace us. That's replacement theory. They are concerned that they'll be replaced by some other people. And so we come up with these constructs to figure out how to thin out their numbers. And one way to thin out their numbers is to manage how wealth operates among them. Another, how their numbers are allowed to increase, how their numbers are allowed to flourish. What's that? What group of people has the highest mortality rate in this country, infant mortality rate in this country? Yeah. It's as a black woman who is more likely than any other woman in this country to die giving birth. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another way of dealing with it is to withhold or make access to health care easy. So if you withhold health care, then you can affect the numbers of them that increase. And so that's why I ask you the question about what makes a person powerful. Yes, Mary?
I think people have forgotten that the origination of Planned Parenthood was to make sure minority babies weren't born in great numbers.
Now, I didn't know that was the original. I didn't know the original intention was to manage minority children. But it's not a surprise because it happened between the Egyptians and the Israelites. When the people in the majority felt themselves threatened by the people in the minority, they decided we got to do something. In our time, maybe we'll sell them a lot of guns, or maybe we'll restrict the neighborhoods where they are likely to reside. We'll draw red lines around certain neighborhoods and create ghettos, create communities of color, restrict the places where they are allowed to reside. You remember any of the slave codes? I mean, I know you wouldn't remember them because you're that old, but you might remember things like what got Emmett Till killed, looking at a white person. Couldn't do that. You couldn't buy, a white farmer was restricted in what he could buy from a black farmer, or a white person was restricted. In the beginning, Africans in America, males, could vote. But in the middle of the 1900s, in the middle of the 19th century, or 1800s, in the middle of the 19th century, that was changed in an effort to restrict how power works. Because if they continued to be brought over in the numbers that they were being brought over from Africa, it wouldn't be long between the enslaved people who were hoodwinked and hijacked and brought over against their will, and the numbers who gave birth would outnumber the people who brought them here in the first place. Now, for the Europeans in the very beginning, it was all economics. When they found out that they could make money selling tobacco especially, and corn later, in this country, the Europeans had sense enough to recognize, y'all gonna need some help with that. I think I can help you, get you some help. And I think I can do it at a cost you can afford. And because of the way that institution rose and the things that were done to keep the enslaved people from becoming powerful or even feeling powerful, they felt minimized. They kept their heads down. For the most part, stopped looking up. For the most part, stopped trying to lift themselves up. Forgot about progress, forgot about the notion of emancipation, forgot about the notions of the things that perhaps characterized, no doubt, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of them before they left Africa. What do you think the people who were enslaved did in Africa before they found themselves chopping cotton and sugar in America?
They were skilled craftsmen. They were farmers. They had all sorts of societies. They wrote. They did all kinds of things. They did everything in expert ways. Yeah,
teachers, artists, manufacturers, inventors. Rulers. People with the gifts in administration who knew how to get things done, who knew how to lead people, and all of these people are brought and hobbled, so to speak. Their hands and feet tied in a way that causes them to forget about who they were and where they came from. And what happens when you forget where you came from? You can't imagine where you can go. And so as long as, who was it? I think it was B2, the Preacher Sunday, telling us how important it is that we inspire and encourage our young people, so that they will imagine themselves. You know, when I first got here to this congregation, I was really distressed at the number of children who had never been out of this part of Hampton Roads, who had never been through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, never been on the other. They've heard about the peninsula and know that 2 of the 7 cities are over there, but then really any real experience with it. I've always been convinced that once they can see something else, they can imagine something else. Once they can see someone like them in another position, they can aspire to be there. is not a new situation. What happened with Jacob was his grief-stricken sons. His grief-stricken sons were constrained by the promise that had been made to Jacob that he would when he died be buried in a certain place. He wanted his bones to be carried to a certain place, and so there was made this agreement that this would happen. When people die, when somebody important dies, when somebody powerful, somebody relevant, somebody who has exercised influence, someone who has been effective at directing dies, the remnant, as part of the grief process, worries about what happens next. So that when Carter Woodson says to the country, let's have a Black History Week, and during Black History Week, what we'll do is talk about inventions, talk about poetry, talk about the accomplishments of our people in this country. But most of the time, we don't talk about the accomplishments of our people before they got here. And yet, when we reflect, all the slaves weren't running around like making a Tarzan movie. They didn't all live in the jungle. Lots of people lived in cities. Timbuktu is a real city. And the University of Timbuktu has a real significant place in history in terms of the assembly, the gathering of knowledge, and the distribution, if you will, transfer of knowledge and information. So when the next time somebody comes to you and with a proposal that we forget about the history of this country, what they want you to forget about is how you got to where you are, both their role and your role. Fleet Bank is one of the richest and oldest banking systems in this banking institutions in the country. You know what the fleet was? The fleet of vessels that brought Africans to this shore to be sold. And so for 300, 400-year-old money, you had money for 400 years, you're all right. Yes, Mary?
And you're making a good point of how we revise history. Mm-hmm. Everybody keep talking about a white Jesus or a blue-eyed Jesus or a black Jesus. Let's just look at the facts. The Jews would not send Paul and Barnabas. They ended up in Cush, which is modern-day Ethiopia, and the blacks commissioned them to go out and do all that evangelism. So why is it a white Jesus that we keep talking about? He's everybody's Jesus, and we played a major part in the forwarding of the gospel. Well, way back when.
Yeah, because the matter of how I make myself feel, the easiest way to make myself feel high is to find somebody who's lower than me. And the most people, when there are more people lower than me, the higher I can be. And so I'm not angry because of a generation in this country that feels put out or put upon because they don't understand why I can't get over slavery. I used to work for a guy in back between 96 and 2003. I worked for him, and he was determined that there was no such thing as a legacy of slavery that endured to the point that it would affect Africans in America. He didn't believe it. He didn't believe that if there's such a thing as generational wealth, could there be such a thing as generational poverty? Yes, ma'am. You need a microphone. Sit far apart so it'd be harder for y'all to reach to each other.
Well, I was thinking too, during the times when African Americans could prosper and increase their wealth, it was always taken away in some way. You know, we're not letting you get that far. And right now, if you look at it, look at all of the money that African Americans are making now. The ball players making millions, and then they're increasing their wealth. So, and they're able to live a lot better than what past people could do. So now they say, wait a minute, hold it. And they have power, because if you have money, you have some power.
Yeah.
And so they're getting real afraid. And when they get afraid, they start doing dangerous things to us, like killing us.
Yeah. Mary, put up verses 2 through 6, please. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I'm about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up, bury your father, as he made you swear to do." Jacob had the insight to prepare for the time when he was no longer powerful, to prepare the generation that would succeed him, knowing full well that he couldn't stay with them forever. What we miss, Sister Scroggins, I think you're right, is that the generations that will follow us benefit from the preparations that we make, knowing the things that we know. And how are we led to oppose that? By being persuaded, by being duped into forgetting about all the things that have been done to get us from where we were to where we are. Nobody, I'm not the first person in my family to earn a bachelor's degree, but I'm the first one to earn a doctorate. I'm not the first one in my family to buy a house, but I don't want to be the last one. And so I'm determined that everything I can do to position my sons and their children so that they won't start at zero where I started. I started at zero. My first job, I worked roughly 20 hours a week, from 4 to 7 Monday to Thursday, 4 to 7:30 on Friday, and 8 to 8 on Saturday for $8 a week. It is 1964. Yeah, for $8 a week. That's my first salary. Now, I must say that I paid my first college tuition at Southern in the summertime of 1967, and my first semester duty was $17. So it was a long time ago, and a lot of things were different. But I didn't have sense enough to imagine spending the earliest years of my working life, especially my adult working life, preparing a world for the children who would succeed me. Jacob did. And so Jacob made some plans. He gave some instructions. He put some time in, and he made an investment in the children who he thought would take advantage of good advice and position themselves to build on the increase that had come to their father. It's important for us, when we find our way to increase in every form, to figure out how to hand over our wealth to people who we have groomed to be responsible enough to come to a day in a few years where our family, our children will have 400-year-old money. That's how you get there. They went through the grief. You got to go through the period of grief when the loss takes place. But you can't grieve forever. And so what Jacob had taught them was when the grief is past, it's time for you to go to work. It's time for you to get some things done. And even the Pharaoh was cooperative, was agreeable when it came to honoring what Joseph requested, because the Pharaoh himself had learned a thing or two about Joseph and his ability to earn or to deserve anything. And verses 7 through 13 show us how the Pharaoh himself learned to respect Joseph.
So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt.
He had a 21-gun salute. He had earned a reputation for himself. He went in slavery, Joseph did, but he had earned a reputation for himself. So he won some honors. He won some respect. Go ahead, Mary, I'm sorry.
Besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers, those belonging to his father's household, only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company.
He had a horse-drawn carriage. And it just didn't pick him up 2 blocks from the cemetery. Go ahead.
When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly.
They cried. They didn't hold back on their mourning. They didn't hold back on the demonstrations of their respect. Now, some people have a hard time with the way other people grieve at funerals. It don't take all that crying and slobbering and all that loud music, all that shouting, all that whatever it is. But if you feel it bad, then you're likely to say it bad. Go ahead, Mary, back to that verse.
When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. Mm-hmm. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, the Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. Mm-hmm. That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's son did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite.
Yeah. That's just 13. So this is a demonstration of a person who has earned a place. Now, Jacob didn't have to agree when his sons came back and say, we met this guy in Egypt, and he told us to come back and get you and Benjamin and bring everybody to Egypt. Jacob could have said, that don't sound like a good look. I don't think I want to do that. Did he give you any corn? He said, no, well, he gave us a little corn, but he said he wanted us to come back, and he said he wanted you to come back with us. Here's a place where the sons of Jacob have learned to respect a man whose wisdom, whose guidance, whose admiration have won to him a great deal of respect. It's not as important for me. I like being liked. I like when people like me. But if they like me and disrespect me, I don't like that at all. If they respect me but don't like me, I can live with that. Because respect comes to a person based on the way the person carries herself, based on the way the person carries himself. So people don't have to like you, but it's easy to be disrespectful. People do it all the time. Children disrespect their parents in public all the time. People disrespect the legacies of people who've tried to make life easier for them all the time. And so when somebody raises a conversation about a strike or a demonstration or a march against a certain thing or a certain issue, it doesn't take long for people to forget about John Lewis, especially when he just died. It doesn't take people long all they know about Martin Luther King is a holiday. But the legacies of these men, it didn't take long to forget about Fannie Lou Hamer. We don't pay much attention to the people whose work has earned for them the kind of respect that we ought to want to teach. Now, I don't know what would have happened had I answered a teacher, if the teacher asked me a question and my mama found out. What'd you say? That's that word that Zora Neale Hurston said the devil made. You know that story? The devil asked God if he could have some angels. And God said, you can have all the angels you can put in your mouth. And so the devil put a big mouthful of angels, his jaws, just cheeks just pushing out. And said, walking away going where the devil goes when he goes where he goes. And was asked a question. What you got in your mouth? So he opened his mouth to talk. And all the angels got out. So he went back and got himself another mouthful of angels. And this time, somebody asked him, what you got in your mouth? He said, Yeah, that's a Zora Neale Hurston story. Yeah. But we don't always teach our children respect. We don't teach them yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. We don't teach them yes, sir, no, sir. We don't teach them to face people. We don't teach them to look directly. Looking down is a slave code leftover. You're supposed to look down. You're not supposed to look up. You're not supposed to look at the person you're talking to. You don't know that's a slave code thing, but that's a slave code thing. You've been taught to look down. And unless we teach our children otherwise, they won't learn to show respect, and they won't know how to earn respect. Jacob taught his children how to earn respect, and when he died, they showed respect not only for him, but they showed respect for Joseph. So much so that the spectators thought they were thought the Egyptians were having a party, because he knew all them Jews couldn't have all them horses and elephants and dressed the way they're dressed, because they were, after all, people held in slavery. People who are enslaved do not give up their identity. They don't stop being who they are. A metal worker remains a metal worker. A painter remains a painter. A banker remains a banker. A carpenter remains a carpenter. He doesn't stop being who he is. A teacher remains a teacher. What has happened in our time is we have in so many ways lost our sense of our selfhood. I've said before in Olive Grove that God has given each of us our own individual self, and it's ours to keep. And if we choose to, we can carry our self back to the one who gave it to us when we're through with our self down here. But if we destroy our self, your one self, how do you destroy yourself? By what you do to yourself. You got to help yourself. Yourself is all you got. You might run out of money, but you still get to keep yourself. You got to love yourself. You love yourself by taking care of yourself. Wrap your arms around yourself. Yeah, pat yourself on the back. Find somebody who will pat you on yourself on the back, and you pat them on the back, so that we learn to build on the seed, how to nurture the seed that God gives, so that we can enjoy the benefits and pleasures that can be enjoyed in this one self. But if somebody tells you that your self is useless, that your self is worthless, and they tell you that over and over and over, and you believe that your self has lost its value, then you start acting like yourself ain't worth nothing. And if you treat yourself like that, other people will treat yourself the same way. What I like about, one thing I like about Jacob and Joseph, his relationship with Joseph, clearly they had a special relationship when Joseph was just a little boy. But Jacob didn't stop having a special love for Joseph. And he continued in the course of his life to pour out into him. Now, maybe you don't have a son, but if you have a daughter, pour out of yourself into herself so that she'll have more to work with. She doesn't have to start where you started. And teach her to value herself so she can keep herself for the future. We've been going at this for 50 minutes, Cornelius, is that right?
Something like that.
So since we're supposed to go to 9, I'm going to ask you to take a break for 10 minutes and come back at 8 o'clock and we'll start again. Mary, I don't know what our YouTube people will do for those 10 minutes, but maybe they'll take care of themselves.
Mary J. Blige said, look in the mirror and say, good morning, gorgeous. I said that's what Mary J. said. Mary J. Blige said.
No, but
Said, look in the mirror and say, good morning, gorgeous. Mary J. Blige said, look in the mirror every morning. Oh, my Lord. Sometimes it's 9 o'clock because in my eating time. Yeah, because this is Vacation Bible School adult class. Normally we just have a 1-hour Bible study on Wednesday, but this is part of Vacation Bible School, so we got an extra hour. Next Wednesday we'll go back to the regular 1-hour class, I guess. We'll be back in Romans next Wednesday? Yeah. 15, I think it is, ain't it? Yeah, 15. 15? Mm-hmm. Do you ever be home in August 4 Sunday? Because you know that's when the Jones, Fitzgerald, there's a big family reunion at Greater Triumph. Jones, Fitzgerald, they used to have theirs every 4th Sunday in August. Greater Triumph got their Family and Friends Day when? Ain't that the 1st or 2nd Sunday in August? Something like that? I got to call. I call my cousin. I'll find out. Because they still looking for a pastor too, ain't they? Yeah. I think Furby left. Furl left. Pastor Furl, the big dude, I think he left. Because during COVID, yeah, he started a trucking business during COVID and it took off. So I guess the trucking business became too much for him to do plus be a pastor, full-time pastor. Yeah, that's the one thing about going home. I went to Greater Trump. You can count on 20-minute sermon. Yes, Mr. Williams. Yes, sir. Why? No. The Texas pastor. He said we could have it. Who? Well, kick her on the back and tell her we are. I'll call her.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Tell me the parallels that you see between Israel in Egypt and Africans in America. I'll wait. Do you see any? Okay.
Well, we were, taking it from our land and from our,
Okay.
just the slavery itself of being taken from another land and been put into enslavement. That's just the most obvious one.
Yeah. I asked Judy. I said, tell me the parallels you see between Israel in Egypt and Africans in America. And Lorna said, our residents. Now, I must say that they went on purpose, didn't they? Yes, Mary.
They were denied wealth and property and ownership.
And I take it that and so are we. Yeah. Often denied the ability to secure wealth, to own stuff, including property, our own property. Any other similarities? You need a microphone, Benny. It's on, it sounds like.
African Americans in America have always been made to feel like they had no worth. And I think that's the same way that the Egyptians
Treated the Israelites.
treated Israel.
Yeah.
They were not worthy. They made them slaves, and they had them work long hours, and you know, the same thing they did to us.
Yeah. Called upon to do impossible things, given tasks that were all but impossible to do. They made brick without straw. They learned to eat food that was not consistent with the choices that they would make for their own for themselves. They were not always permitted to practice the systems of belief, the systems of faith that they had adopted for themselves. And they were separated from the things that made them historically who they were. They were restricted from the things that they could do for themselves and with others. In terms of work that they did, certain attire was different. They couldn't wear what the other Egyptians wore. When they ate, slaves ate standing up. They didn't eat sitting down. They didn't eat like decent. In the case of Africans in America, they often ate standing up, ate in the kitchen, or ate in slave quarters, and ate what was left over. So there are certain parallels that seem to describe a life of a person who grows in slavery or through slavery, and some of the things that Jacob and Joseph have experienced have caused us to look back in the history of the world and make comparisons between us, if you will, and them. Yes, Mary.
They also use violence to change the attitude and the willingness to be yourself, as you said, and to break the spirit and change the culture and community that we were living in.
Okay. That's what the Israelites did in Egypt?
Oh yeah, they were beaten in Egypt and relegated to a certain neighborhood and controlled on what they could. Violence was a tool.
Tomorrow I'm going to tell you who said that violence is the severest demonstration of poverty. And there are neighborhoods aplenty where we can see violence and poverty like sisters or brothers growing up together, nurturing one another, so that the more violence, the more poverty. Gladys would say the one that you feed is the one that grows. That's the one that gains the strength. So if what we feed our poor selves on a diet of violence, then what we do is contribute to our own genocide, our own suicide, our own wiping ourselves out. After, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Is that a hand-raised microphone? You send a man for a microphone? I like it. I wish I could send a man for a microphone. He walked that far for me.
A real man.
A husband man.
Thank you, Phil. I was thinking about a comparison with the Israelites and Egypt and the slaves during slavery time. And we can look at Joseph and Joseph's brothers. The brothers were slaves, and Joseph was a slave also, but he got to live in the big house. And during slavery,
He was an overseer.
he was an overseer.
An overseer, I should say.
Yes, but he was a slave. And in America, they had the field slaves, and they had the slaves that lived in the big house. So the field slave, the ones that lived in the big house, like Joseph, had a superior attitude towards the ones that lived outside.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of truth in it. I think the place where it gets a little fuzzy for me is where they slept, because I don't think that the people who slept, who worked in the big house, slept in the big house. After the work day was done, they all slept in the slave quarters. Now, go ahead, Mary.
But when you think about the generational strongholds and the legacy, those people who worked in the house had greater opportunities to learn how to read, to write escape letters, to inherit from the last master in the house, and they ended up with land and opportunity. But the rifts in between the darker and lighter skinned people that were created kept us from building on that legacy of opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it's not true that every one who is every slave inherited financially from his the coffin, the coffin of wealth.
It was few and far between, but if you go to the black churches, even here in Norfolk, and you'll see more than one inherited the land that church was built on.
I'm interested to find out more about that. What we are likely and visibly to have inherited, much to our detriment, is how much like the owners we look physically. So that we've come to a place where the lighter you are, the better you are. Even people of color make these distinctions when it comes to for the census people. They have decided that one way to keep people of color from becoming too many is to add a category called Latin but not black, or Latin and white, as though they didn't see each other as the same. Now, for the most part, in my experience, they don't make that distinction. You go to Cuba, they don't typically make that kind of distinction. There are some places and some people who do. If they look white enough to be thought of as white, then they try to get by as white. But that's typically not true, except when it comes to people who look like me. We have a tendency to give more value to people based on how light or how dark they are. And that's one of the most negative components of the legacy that comes to us. I can't do that with Joseph and his brothers. I don't find a thing in the text that makes that make sense. But when we get closer to the end of this chapter, we do see some instances where the brothers go to Joseph, mainly because Joseph has some truck in the big house, as Reverend Bell has said. Joseph has some pull. Joseph has some authority. Joseph has made a name for himself, and so his brothers go to him. We are more likely to go to, Philip than we are Hawkins, than we are likely to go to the mayor when we have a question where we could go to the mayor ourselves. We are more likely to send somebody to a meeting at City Hall when we have a complaint about Oakwood rather than going to make our own complaint in our own voice, because we have abdicated our sense of responsibility, or sought to avoid whatever pain might be or difficulty might be associated with making a trip like that for ourselves, so that we make a really big deal out of what we know. I mean, who we know, than the deal we make out of what we know. I gotta figure out how to make this connection in a way that makes sense to you. So far, we've talked about mostly tangible things like wealth and power and property and health as a value, voting as an institution, a thing that we value, and we don't seem to have much difficulty putting those constructs in the right place. You know, a thing has whatever value we decide it has. So we make gold and valuable, not because it's shiny, because we say so. And we could have done that with charcoal if we wanted to, but gold is lighter than charcoal. It's brighter and it shines better. Yeah. There is a place where we have to recognize that when Abraham Lincoln, who some historians describe as the great emancipator, signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he was not really interested in becoming more like Jacob. He wasn't really interested in becoming more like Joseph. He may have been more interested in becoming more like George in the kinds of ways that the first president sought to establish a union, a United States of America. And Lincoln was on the verge of losing the hold on that country that had been established 77 years before. And so one of the things that changed the landscape was what he did to make free men of slaves, free people of them, no longer people in bondage owned by other people, but now, based on that document, free people. The problem is, just as the Israelites had a hard time letting go of Pharaoh, some of us have a hard time letting go as well, so that we hold on to this invisible sense of power and strength and give it credence over us and our sense of personhood, selfhood. Give it authority that we should figure out how to keep for ourselves. It was such a powerful move that in all the states that existed except one, the word got through quickly, relatively quickly. So that on New Year's Eve, or on the next year, I think it was signed in September of 1862 and effective in January of 1863. And yet the people in Texas didn't get the word until 6 months later. And so they celebrate their liberation. When did the people in Texas become free? The enslaved people in Texas.
You mean legally or mentally?
I mean, when did the people in Texas become free? Yeah, Judy Brown said it's still not free. I think Mary says it was illegal to hold them in bondage any longer after the signing of and the effective date of the Emancipation Proclamation, and certainly after the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. But the vestiges of slavery hang on, so that we have a hard time letting go of slavery. Slavery has let us go, but we haven't let go of slavery. So we hang on to it and continue to live in the places where we used to live, places where there's no longer forced to continue to reside there. But we tell ourselves, or allow ourselves to be told, this is the best we can do, and so we do. Yes, Mary?
Well, while you're waiting for the promised land, the wilderness can be a hard place.
Yeah.
So you want to go back to your leeks and your flesh pots and your federal assistance and your everything else you got free, because you're not used to being free. Free costs. It takes courage to be free.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Mary said it takes courage to live in freedom. What does that look like? Yes. Yeah, you need a microphone, though, but I do want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. Yeah, when you finish with a microphone, there's no need to turn it off.
Okay, good. What they do now is they started doing it in subtle ways, changing rules, changing the way you do things, and things like that that you wouldn't notice until you were going to be using whatever, things like using something or buying this and that. They started looking at doing things like that, especially since a lot of the African Americans became educated. Mm-hmm. We became educated. We started using the laws that we had to get the things that we needed. We started getting homes. Mm-hmm. We started getting businesses and all of those things. So now they're beginning to attack the things, the laws in this area, mm-hmm. so that you have a difficult time getting the things that you need in order to survive.
Yeah. I think you're right about that, and I think that's what makes what is called institutional racism institutional. The racism is built into the institution, so that the way, yes, Mary?
I'm concerned that it's not the Egypt and the world around us, but the Egypt and the world in us. Because after we went through Rosewood, we went through all that. Yes, those terrible things happened, but we lost the mindset of pouring into the next generation. Of all the nickels and quarters that built this beautiful church we call Olive Grove, mm-hmm. we lost that fight that came through civil rights. Mm-hmm. It's just like all the people that could have left Babylon and gone back to Jerusalem. Some of them decided, I like Babylon, yeah. And they stayed.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. We're going to bring you a microphone.
Oh, right here. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I was focused more on what you was asking. Mm-hmm. Your question was, what does it mean to be free? Mm-hmm. I think I rephrased it wrong. What is the cost of freedom, or what does it mean?
Are you on the right track?
Yeah, but that's the question I was listening to, and then the ladies chimed in, and I was listening to them too. Mm-hmm. But I was just going to say, the cost of freedom to most it has been paid, but it hasn't been paid. For the younger generation, I dare say it hasn't been paid, because the forefathers that I know, the ones that raised me, certain stuff that the younger generation get away with now, it's an insult to what our forefathers have already established. Then to turn around and see the young people not taking advantage of the stuff that our forefathers have trailblazed and paved and died and got shot for, hung, lynched, dogs set loose on them for, they take it for granted and they take them own selves out. So they haven't paid where our ancestors have paid. The cost of freedom is like, it's not balanced out. The scales are more in favor of our forefathers who had the blazed trails that some of us are not either taking advantage of or choose not to acknowledge or work with. So I was listening to you on that. That's why I just had to say this part. The cost of freedom, it depends. For me, the forefathers have paid, but for the people that raised me to be where I am today, I'm trying to establish that in me and my daughter. But some of the people that have forefathers that were more prominent than mine, it's an insult. Yeah. So there is really no cost of freedom when we're just giving it right back in the faces of our ancestors. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Reverend Bell.
And I was thinking about what you had said earlier. Two things. Now, emancipation, at that moment, the people in Texas were free. It's just that they didn't know that they were free. So freedom is a mindset. Now, so a man thinketh, so is he. Now, earlier you were saying, if someone say negative things to you over and over and over, you begin to believe that. It's a mindset. So we can say, I can't, I can't, I can't. We do have the ability, but it's like a caged bird. It's been caged for so long that they think they can't fly away. But you open up the door, they're free, but their mindset, I can't fly. So when we look closely at freedom, I'm no longer, the song says, I'm no longer a slave to sin. We are free. We are free, but our mindset says that we're not. So freedom,
it's a thing in your mind. Yes, Judy. Ron, will you bring that microphone up here? Yes, Judy Brown. I'm sorry, Mary.
I think we're all saying something, but I think sometimes we miss the strategic warfare that's going on. Just like the children of Israel did okay for 10 years and then didn't do okay for 40 years. When they dismantled our homes and family structure, whether it was welfare or the educational lives or the school system, they dismantled the foundation that would have fed into our sense of identity.
Right.
And we began to like Babylon. We began to act like the people of the Canaanites and the Hittites. We made those choices, so we can only blame them to a certain degree. But we got to understand this is warfare, spiritual and emotional warfare.
Tell me your name, dear. Yes, ma'am. Sharon? Shannon. What Shannon said is that there are people who paid for our freedom, and they ask us only to pay on what they paid for, so that they provided the corpus, but we have to keep growing the seed, and by taking advantage of opportunities, by going through doors that have been opened or down paths that have been opened. Yeah, I think that's where you and Mary and Gladys say the things.
But what I'm saying is,
hang on, Mary. Yes, Judy.
I agree with what was said earlier about the history. Our children, our young people, they don't know our history.
No.
And it's kept from them.
Right.
You talked about Carter Woodson and Black History. It started off with 1 week, and then they gave us 1 month. and that month was February, the shortest month on the calendar. And now they're taking books out of the schools.
Right.
Teachers are being forbidden to talk about things that make some people feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So it's really hard for people today to have to pull on it. It was given to us. It's there. But if you don't know what the struggle was, it's hard for you to appreciate it.
That's how you miss. I'm coming, Mary. That's how you miss the meaning, the important meaning of what makes a thing institutional. If you want to change the thing, change the institution. If you want to change the thing, you want to change the person, change the rules. If you want to change the thing, change the person. If you liked it better when every state made its own laws on practically every subject, make it like it was, so that each state gets to decide the rules about abortion. Each state gets to decide how much money they'll spend on education. Each state on its own gets to decide how easy or difficult they make it to have access to medicine. Each state gets to decide. Each state takes from the pot of the whole, and in each state the rules are unevenly applied, so that in some states people can proceed and advance, while in other states the same people are forced to fall behind. So that's the power of the institution. That's why Shannon and Mary and Gladys are all talking about the same thing. Mary uses the word strategic because the strategy is it's not a play. When you play football, you run the number of plays that you run them one at a time. But what you really are trying to do is accomplish something to cause the opponent to be disadvantaged, so that when the game is over, you end up winning. Very few games end up in ties. And in the case of a country, if there are such divisions beyond the party divisions, beyond Democratic Party and a Republican Party, if there's some other divisions based on color, based on income, based on what people do for a living, based on what they own, based on where they reside, then the institutions that end up most prominent, wealthiest, end up making sure that everything that they do is out of reach of all of the other people in the institution who they desire to leave out or to keep out. And so it is deep. And Mary, it is spiritual, and it always has been. It's the same play. It's the same series of problems. That's why I picked this chapter of Genesis and not the 50th chapter of Exodus to have this conversation. I'm not the 14th chapter of Exodus, rather, where that whole story plays out with the plagues and the roaches and the flies and the frogs and all that. Yes, Mary?
I think that the thing that I remember, like Judy, when my daddy gave me identity, I knew my family history. I knew black history. But when you separate the pillars of the family and money becomes the object, all we did was move out of the neighborhood. We did not pour back into that next generation.
I want you to change the tense of your verb so we don't feel like we stuck with what we got.
No, what I'm saying is that same thing can be reversed by our choices.
Yeah.
If we give our youth of the church a sense of, you a powerful little prince of princes, you a smart little child, we have to put that back in. And even if they're the first one to graduate high school, we can still break that stronghold in that cycle based on the spirit and the mind. Yeah.
You know why I make so much out of our children and their accomplishments? Why I ask to see their report cards? And it didn't take long before the children learned that rather than me seeing their report cards, If Joe Tyler sees the report card, they good. If I see it, I give them a hug and a kiss and a pat on the back. But if Joe Tyler sees the report card and they get A's, Joe Tyler gives them money. So somehow they have learned to embrace more the money than they are the sense of pride in their accomplishment. Pardon?
What about the C's?
I need you to hear. I'm microphone. I can't hear you.
You said they got the money if they got the A's. What about the C's and the D's?
They don't get the same reward from JT. Now what they get from me is encouragement. So it's not like I ignore the children who don't make all A's, but I want to know what grades they got. Once we know what grades they got, we know what help they need. Once we know what help they need, then we can figure out the right people to go to them. When we say No Child Left Behind, we're serious. When they said it, they was playing.
I just wish when you make a statement like that, make a complete statement, because it does sound like it was the A's that got rewarded.
Yeah, it's a practice that you don't know about. The practice has been to reward certain grades in a certain way. I ask every child, bring me your report card. I want to see it. Now, some of them try to hide the report cards from me, and I insist, I really want to see your report card. And so when we discover that a child needs help in a particular way, then we pair that child with somebody who can help them, and we help them. Now, we set a standard. If you get to this standard, you get this reward. On your way to that, I want you to be able to say, yes, I'm working toward it. I'm getting better. You get better all the time. That's my motto. Do better and be better. Don't stay, whatever you do, don't stay like this. Even if you think you're good. Reach higher. Reach better. The problem is, if you insist on giving everyone the same reward, then you have a more difficult time trying to find ways to incentivize people to attempt to accomplish. So no, I'm not the guy who gives everybody the same trophy because they played in the game. Somebody really is the most valuable player. Yes, Reverend. Ron, your wife wants a microphone, and I guess you got to go get it. Yeah. But don't misunderstand. The point that I'm trying to make is really not based on, or it's not a point about rewards. It's a point about when I die, the plan is for my children to benefit equally from my death. Not the one who somebody might perceive needs more or less, but they benefit equally. So my job is to do the best I can do to have something to distribute. What I want you to do is do the same thing with your children. Try to become the best you can become, the wealthiest you can become, to have the most of everything to share that's worth sharing, and in all your leaving, don't forget to leave them with the Lord, and leave the Lord and them holding hands. Yes, Gladys.
And because as we know that one of these old days, we're going to leave here, so it is our job to leave something, the best that we can, regardless of what it may be, for the ones that's coming behind us. Whether it's financial, but of course the most important thing is to leave them knowing about the Lord, because that's back in Genesis, you know, that's when you leave here, when you're packing up and leave, remember to teach them these things.
Yeah.
Along
Tied around
the way.
their necks.
Sir?
Yeah, tied around their necks. So that yes, Janet. You're gonna feel much better in the morning, Ron, after all this running around.
I was just gonna say, Pastor, listening to the example you gave about you as well as the other member in the congregation, not compensating, but rewarding the individuals based on the grades they're getting. Okay, I'm looking at it from a business aspect as well as a Christian aspect. God, like he said, he's not rewarding the most valuable player. There is no most valuable player in the kingdom. However, we're down here on earth. When you see somebody, when you go to a physician, you don't want a subpar physician to handle your health. So it's not about the fact of whether they made a C, a B, or an A to some degree. But when you put your life in somebody's hand on the surgery table, you want to know that they studied long enough and put in enough effort, energy, and had enough courage to go further than what is expected.
Yeah.
Because once they put those leads on you, you flatline, they don't know how to bring you back. What were you doing in school?
Yeah. Now I want you to take that image, Shannon, and make all of us, the entire community of Africans in America, put us on the table. We are the bodies. We are the body. And the body has millions of members, millions of parts. Some parts of our body are responsible for taking care of other parts of our body. We use our hands to wash our faces and our feet. We use our teeth to chew the food that we put into our mouth. We use our arms to hold on to things when we get some, because we ought to keep some. And if we are, as a race, a body, and we are on the table, we got to take more responsibility for who we give the scalpel to for performing a procedure. Now, I always say I never have asked a doctor for a transcript, but I have gone to look up people's reputations and see what other people think of them. And I think I like the illustration that you use regarding the importance of the body. And I do. If he's working on my heart, I want him to have graduated #1 in the heart class. Now, I don't really want a podiatrist to cut my heart, even if he did get A's. I want to know what you got in hearts. And that's the one I want attending to me. And that's the attitude I'm suggesting we need when it comes to tending to our present and our future. Now, a lot of the people who have ability to contribute to our past are in our past and have left treasures for us to find. If we ignore the treasures and don't take advantage of the treasures that exist, then we do it to our detriment and at our own peril, because we forget that this part, the self, only gets to stay as long as it gets to stay, maybe 100 years. So that we can't forget about the part that lasts forever. And so when we get all we get, we leave them with that legacy, but we also want to leave them, I want to leave them, including the people who are present here and whose names, who are called members of Olive Grove. I want all of them to get the same thing from me. And that's everything I have. And I've spent the last 13 years trying to say, I want you to know everything I know. And if I don't say it soon enough, ask me a question, and I'll try to answer it for you. If I know the answer, I want you to know the answer. And I would like that to be our attitude. Not in a way of competition, to look over and say, oh, you gave Stokely so-and-so, well, what about Bell? Well, Bell already had it, so I gave Bell something else. So everybody doesn't need the same thing, but even though everybody needs something. That's my approach to that. I cut across you because it was such an important point that you make with that illustration, so if you still remember what it was.
Understandable, Pastor. I see where you're going with it also. It's like in the body of Christ, there's no one part more important than the other.
Right.
But in the same breath, I was going along the lines of the level of encouragement. Like you said, you plateau might give a pet or a hug to all. It's not different. But the gentleman that's
With the money.
Yeah, with the money, is on the carnal level for me. Like I said, it's the spiritual and the business side. They try to compensate, like say you get a promotion from one aspect if you do so many successful surgeries that are payable. Whereas here, we're just trying to make sure all our children get encouraged regardless of what they're doing and get them the help if they don't have, if they're not meeting certain levels according to certain standards.
Right.
So we're on the same page, Pastor.
And let me paint this picture for you so that we have a group of men who usher typically on the first Sunday of every month. We call them the male ushers. And the male ushers among themselves collect money on a regular basis, and we keep it in the treasury. What they used to do with that money was run a program that we call Project H. I've decided that Project H stands for help. And every Wednesday after school, children from high school to kindergarten would come out to Olive Grove and get help with their schoolwork. Every time there was a semester ends, what I do is ask all the children to bring me their report cards, and I want to see the report cards. And I often do what I did with the little girl, a young lady, last Sunday. I asked the children to come forward, and I tell people this, like in the case last Sunday, this young lady just graduated from Alabama A&M University. And the first time I did something like that was one of the Jan's daughters, and she was such a pretty girl that some people misunderstood the way I called her Hollywood, and people misunderstood. She was gorgeous, probably still is, and people were insulted by the fact that I oohed and awed over this little girl and what she had accomplished. But I will ooh and ah over everybody who I've been to a birthday party for 3-year-olds. I went to a graduation today from middle school graduation. And I've been to those before. I don't go to graduations because I like going to graduations. I go to graduations because I want this child to see me at her graduation from middle school and say, when I graduate from high school, I can't wait to see my pastor there. And so in high school, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that when graduation time comes, my pastor gets an invitation because I want him to be in that number at my graduation. Now, this ain't the last event that I expect to see these people move through. I want them when we all get together. When it's getting up time, I want us all to be together. And so this is my contribution to that end, offering encouragement, offering challenge to everybody who ought to be challenged, and encouragement, everybody ought to be encouraged. That's kind of our process. And for me, that's the strategic part. There's a strategy to undo that, but there's a strategy to get it done. There's a strategy to stunt growth, but there's got to be a strategy to encourage growth. And so if you acknowledge the fact that both strategies exist, then you get to decide which one you want to use. Now, there's another strategy to obfuscate, to confuse, to make obscure, make difficult to see, to get you lost in the weeds, to get you lost on things that don't matter, to get you lost in the places that won't get you where you really want to go. That's another part of the same strategy, but you got to figure it out and learn how to work with it. Jacob had a notion. Jacob knew God. Joseph had a notion. Joseph knew God. Jacob and Joseph had a strategy, and they used the strategy to advance their own people, even in bondage. Even though they were enslaved, even though they were in bondage, they were artistic, they were scholarly, they were crafty, they knew how to do stuff, they cultivated their knowledge, they handed it forward to future generations, they taught what they knew how to do to the children who would follow them. So the fact that we abide in bondage doesn't mean we ought to live easily like slaves. We're supposed to be free. We're supposed to resist domination. We are made for dominion, not domination. But if the weight that attempts to dominate is so heavy that we end up surrendering to the proverbial powers that be, then we give in ways and in times that we dare not. You can't help nobody if you give up, if you stop trying. Can't help anybody if you act like a loser because somebody told you you're a loser. You're not who they say you are. Yeah. Now whoever they are, that's not how you. The identity of the self that you've been given is not lost on you, but it might be hidden in you. And the one who looks for it first is you. Look for the self that's hidden in you. And then you strive to bring that self out so that your self contributes to the greater good. So I was trying to do some other stuff while y'all turned me into a preacher. How did that happen? Yeah. It's the like watching I don't watch horror movies, but I imagine in horror movies when you see the arms of death coming up from the grave and through the dirt and trying to pull somebody from the surface down beneath the surface. That's the thing that slavery is doing to us. The vestiges of that death are reaching into the future generations and making every effort to pull us down into the grave. But that's not home. We don't belong down there. We belong up there. So there are aspects of our existence that are held back by institutional constructs like black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, like Korean Town, like owning a 7-Eleven store, like stipends or grants that are given to people based on where in the world they come from when they land here, like opportunities to receive federal assistance that are not in open view, not easy to find. You can get it, but you got to ask for it. But to ask for it, you got to know that it exists. But if we just create it and don't tell anybody that it exists, then we just reward the people who know that it exists and have sense enough to ask. But anybody who wanted it, she needs a microphone, Ron. Anybody who wanted it can go get it. You got a microphone already?
No, I just wanted to say, like your zip code. So many of us miss why they ask for your zip code, because certain things are available or not available to you based on where you live.
Yeah.
Because your zip code.
Yeah. Census blocks. Yeah. A friend of mine has a church on Creighton Road in Richmond. It's a huge campus. It's getting bigger every day. And across the street from Creighton Road is a development with modest homes, probably between $250 and $350 in price. Because St. Paul's is St. Paul's, when the power goes out at St. Paul's, Mr. Dominion come over and make sure he get back on. And so when St. Paul's power comes back on, the neighborhood just across the street, all their power comes back on too. If you reside in the right place, you will benefit from the best of everything. By the same token, if you reside, they tell us when snow comes, they'll clear this road, Sewell's Point Road, but they get to the side streets days later. And the decisions about that are strangely and oddly connected to how much taxes the people in that census block pay. The snowplow man, though, he just clean up all the snow. He's just cleaning up the snow in some neighborhoods first. So when you don't know why you ought to be in the city council meeting, and you don't go, so a decision to do a thing a certain way in one neighborhood and another way in a different neighborhood is made without your knowledge, and you just presume that it's the same for everybody, but it's not. It's an institutional thing. The institution is designed to take care of people based on whatever rules the institution says apply in that community, to those people, to that race of people, to people in that predicament, in that situation. So when the day of the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to take effect, people in Texas didn't get the word, so they kept acting like they had been acting. They kept feeling like they had been feeling. But when they got the word, they started having a party on that day, and they've been having a party on that day ever since. And they called the party Juneteenth celebration. And it's kind of creeping around the country now, where lots of people are getting into the Juneteenth swing. It's been in the Deep South for a long time. But now people, I call this up South, they're getting the hang of it. What does that say, Cornelius, 56?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We're going to take up this conversation tomorrow night in chapter 50, verse 15, and we'll finish this conversation about finding yourself in his story. What I want you to do between now and tomorrow night is read through particularly Genesis chapter 50, but if you go to another part of the Bible, that'll be all right, because you did it in the Bible. Find yourself in the Word of God Where are you? Are you the Good Samaritan, or are you the one who's been ambushed? Are you the priest who walks by on one side of the road, or are you the priest who say, "Man, I gotta go. I'm sorry. I'm gonna send somebody back for you"? Where are you in the story of salvation? Where are you in the story from creation to lake of fire? Where are you? Find yourself in his story. And when we come back tomorrow night, I want you to, those of you who are here, I want you to talk about it with me. I'm glad we had this time together. And I pray that you'll be able to participate as we go along through this. Thanks for being here. We'll meet tomorrow at, our next Bible study is tomorrow morning at 10 in the fellowship hall at Olive Grove with Reverend Linda Holly. After that, 9:30 on Sunday morning, our regular Sunday school. And we'll have a special celebration for Juneteenth and Father's Day this Sunday. A special guest coming from Washington, D.C., our morning preacher. And in the afternoon, we have a gospel music explosion. And he and his choir from Washington will be a part of that, along with Fully Committed and the Harmonizing Echoes and Reverend Yancey. And so I hope you can make it. In the meanwhile, God bless you. Thanks for coming, and good night.